All right. Hello, everybody. Hello. No music today, usually coming into music, but we're going to have today an abbreviated class. So I want to get started right away. I miscalculated in that I am in Arizona right now, and I planned everything just right. I'm flying to San Francisco in about an hour. I thought, oh, that works out because I'll just teach the class at 12. But Arizona is 1 hour later sometimes, but not always. Arizona has its own time schedule, so it's not just a simple matter of where you're going to be. So I have to rush to make my flight in about a half an hour. So we're going to do a half an hour. I thought, oh, maybe I'll just cancel last minute, but I thought it's worth it for us to get this is online, so nobody's trekking across town. Let's spend a half an hour and learn some Torah, and it'll be, as I said, abbreviated. But I do have some, I think, important Torah for you today. It is, I think, because it's a short class, I want to make one sort of technical point that I think is important for understanding not just this week's Parsha, but all of Jewish law, if I may be so bold, because I want to today talk about the categories of Jewish law, and it's a good week to talk about that. We are reading Parshat Mishpatim, which is one of the categories of Jewish law. Mishpatim, we will soon sort of speak this out, but Mishpatim are a certain kind of law. Jewish tradition names categories within its legal system. We have 613 laws, but some of them are mishpatim, and we'll talk in a second about what that means. There are other categories that have different qualities. The famous other category is chukim, and we've done this actually together before, but we'll go over what the difference is between one kind of law and another. But then there's a third category that we often miss that I want to make sure that we take note of today. So without saying any more, let's just say a blessing. We'll get into it. And we will, we're going to look at a part of Parshat Mishpatim, this week's reading, which we don't often look at, which actually has a little bit of a clue for us to understanding how the Torah is organizing its legal system. Even early on, when we usually when we talk about the legal system, we're talking about Deuteronomy. That's where the legal system really gets set up. And you think of Exodus as just having like just a bundle of laws. Like Moses is just, well, he went up to the mountain. He's got a bunch of laws for us. But I think we'll be able to see in this week's Parsha, in a certain section of this week's Parsha, that there are these categories already are starting to emerge. Okay, so let's say a blessing, and then we're going to do a very brief half an hour class. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay. Okay, so let's begin. This is a source sheet for you all. Let's see if this works. Yeah. Okay, this is a source sheet for you all. And I want to start, I actually think, I'm not sure what last year's class on Mishpatim was, but I think what if my memory serves me, we looked at the word Mishpatim. We spent a lot of time thinking about what Mishpatim are, and we'll do that briefly again, just to introduce ourselves, because that's the first line of this, that's the name of this week's Parsha, and it's a very important category in Jewish law. So let's take a look at that. The Parsha starts this week, Ve'ela HaMishpatim. This is the word. This is one of our three categories, Mishpatim. These are the Mishpatim. Now, let's translate it. So Mishpatim can just mean laws, but it is a certain kind of law, and we sometimes refer to it as ordinances, or, and that's, I don't know if that helps a lot. Ordinances? Why am I spelling that? Ordinances. And sometimes we just use the word to mean justice. Mishpat is justice. Okay. And that gives you a hint. If this is a word for law, but it's also a word for justice, well, you have a sense of what these laws might be about, some kind of justice, but aren't all laws about justice? Aren't all laws about justice? And the quick answer, since we're having a quick class, the quick answer to that question is no. Not all laws in this system are about justice. Maybe not all laws in every system. You know, is the law that you have to stop at a stop sign about justice? Maybe, because it's only right, and like maybe, but there are different categories in all legal systems. is the law that we have a federal holiday on the 4th of July. Is that about justice? You know, so even in our legal system, we can disentangle justice from law, but this word mishpat is sometimes used as a word for justice itself, and so you can tell that these laws are going to be in pursuit of justice. Okay, well, what are these laws? What kinds of laws do we see? And I'll just give you the first few examples. And the first one actually doesn't seem very just to us, because famously, the first law is when you acquire a Hebrew slave, that person shall serve 6 years and then shall go free in the 7th year without payment. Now, that doesn't seem just to us because we live in a world where, you know, we've sort of decided that slavery itself is unjust. But they lived in a world where they were breaking away from slavery, and having a 6-year limit was a big innovation principle in justice. Okay. It's funny. The first law is always slavery, and you always have to kind of apologize for that, because what do you mean? Like, we were just liberated. So that can be a bit of a distraction. And if I ask you, oh, isn't that just that a slave only has to serve for 6 years? You might not, that might not be such an easy answer. But let me give you some easier cases to look at that are much more emblematic of what the Mishpatim are all about. And these cases are just the classic cases of the Talmud. The Talmud spends a lot of time with cases like these. Hignov ish, shor oseh, when a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall pay 5 oxen for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. If the thief is seized while tunneling and he's beaten to death, there's no blood guilt in his case, meaning if someone breaks into your house and you hurt them, that's not your fault. If the sun is risen on him, there is blood guilt in that case. He must make restitution. If he lacks the means, he shall be sold for his theft. But if what he stole, whether ox or ass or sheep, is found alive in his possession, he shall pay double. Okay, it's like that's law for you. It's like the case, the circumstances, different alternatives, the punishment. So yes, justice, but also something a little more practical than what we usually call justice. And that's why I also use the word ordinances, because mishpat is also about ordering things, keeping things regular and staple and orderly, and making a society that works. So mishpatim are the just ordinances in pursuit of a just society, but also just in pursuit of a functional society. That's mishpatim. And those are the laws that Moshe gets a whole big bundle of and gives to us right here this week on the heels of the revelation at Mount Sinai. And we could just finish our class for today, because now we know what happens this week. Okay, but mishpatim are a certain category of law, and we did this, I think, last year also. There's a very famous passage in the Talmud that distinguishes between mishpatim, one category of law, and chukim, another category of law. And this is a famous distinction. Don't worry if you've heard it before, right? We're moving towards looking for a third, but first we have to start with the two that are the classic binary, chukim and mishpatim. And if mishpatim are just ordinances, what are chukim? Well, it's usually translated as decrees, and sometimes translated as rules. So what's the difference between a just ordinance and a rule? Well, here's the Talmud kind of parsing it out for us. And this might be the most important passage in the Talmud. It's one of the most important moments in the Talmud because it's real legal theory. Okay, our rabbis taught that it says in Leviticus 18, my laws, mishpatim, my laws shall you perform. What are mishpatim? Well, they define them. Such commandments which, even if it had not been written, justice would demand that they should be written. And these are idolatry, sexual immorality, murder, theft, and blasphemy. 10 Commandments kind of stuff. In other words, the Talmud is telling us these laws, the mishpatim, it's almost heretical to say you don't even need a Torah for these laws. These are just every society needs thou shalt not kill. Every society needs some terms, maybe not the exact amount, but some terms for what you do when damages occur. These are the kinds of things that, now they stuck idolatry in there. So you may have noted that. Is that really? I think the assumption of the rabbis of the Talmud is any reasonable society would eventually stop doing those things. So we can debate what's in the categories and not. We could say, now, wait a minute, idolatry, that's not a reasonable practicing. Not all religious sentiments have nothing to do with justice. You might say that, but the categories for our purposes are more important. So don't pay attention to the exceptions as you see them, but pay attention to the general flavor of the category. And the general flavor is no murder, no theft. Okay? Every society needs some kind of basic set of regulation, 10 commandments like regulations that not only order the society, but allow it to be a good society, a just society. That's Mishpatim. What are Hukim? And when I say there are two major categories, and I keep saying, oh, where do these two categories come from? Well, they are mentioned very frequently, one after the other. Achukim v'mishpatim. Achukim, if you do the chukim and the mishpatim, these two things, they're mentioned as a unit. And so the Talmud notes that, and you saw that it was quoting Leviticus. Leviticus is another place where they're mentioned as a unit. So here's the verse. The verse is, my laws shall you perform, and my decrees you shall keep. Okay, so this is the continuation of this. My laws shall you perform and my decrees. So you can see the Torah is distinguishing between these two types. Okay, so what's chukim? Such commandments that the Satan challenges. Now that's a whoa, Satan. How did he get in here? Now we did come up with Satan. Satan starts in the book of Job. But Satan is not the devil in our tradition. Satan is kind of like an advocate, an angel that is advocating against humanity. In fact, Maimonides doesn't even like the appearance of Satan here. And when he records this law, he changes it to the nations of the world make fun of you for these laws. Okay, so that gives you a sense like, yeah, Satan. Okay, so if you feel that way too, but one way or another, either Satan, the angelic prosecutor, or the nations of the world make fun of us for these laws. What kinds of laws are they? They are not eating pork. Okay, that's an amazing first one. Such a massive Jewish practice. Kashrut, keeping kosher. But the Talmud is saying that this law, kashrut, there's no real reason for it. It's not something you would come up with on your own. But let's finish the thought. So why do you do it? Not wearing wool and linen. That one to me feels like the ultimate, like so strange. What is that about? And of course, we could speculate, and we've done so in this. Well, wool is from sheep and linen is from plants, and you don't mix animals and plants. Maybe there is a reason, but it's not obvious. The exemption procedure from the obligation to marry a widowed sister-in-law, boy, that's like not obvious, that you have to marry your brother's widow if they were childless. That doesn't make any sense. The purification of the leper and the Yom Kippur scapegoat sacrifice. All of these things are so weird. You like push a goat off of a cliff. You're marrying your sister-in-law. What's going on? So perhaps you will say these things are empty things. Perhaps you will say this means nothing. Therefore, the verse ends. And here, just for those who are following the text, there was a verse. My laws shall you perform. My decrees you shall keep. I am the eternal. That's the end of the verse, as if to say, I know that the second part, the chukim, are not so obvious, but I, the eternal, have decreed it, and you're not allowed to question it. Okay. So that's it. Those are the two categories. And like I said, we've done this before. So, I'm not going to spend too much time kind of going back and forth between the categories and what they mean. And it is one of the most important and fascinating conversations in Jewish legal discourse. The idea that Jewish law contains both laws that every society would have, and then our own particular laws that are more about just some weird stuff that our God wants us to do. And why do we do it? God said so, and that's good enough. And you could have a long conversation about the meaning of the chok, of the decree. The most famous of the decrees, Kashrut's pretty famous, but the most famously named decree is the red heifer. You have to burn a perfectly pure red heifer in order to take its ashes to purify people who have had contact with the dead. It's like, what? Okay, but that's a chok. Zot chukat Torah, that's a chok. Okay. Okay, that's the setup. How much time do we have left? Okay, good. We have 15 minutes left. That's the setup. Now I just want to insert, I want to bring your attention to one other category of law. And I don't know if this is exhaustive. Are there only 3 categories of law? But there may be. The important point here is there are not only 2 categories of Jewish law. There are at least 3 categories of Jewish law. Anybody know what the third category is? Chukim, Mishpatim, and anyone? It's not, I wouldn't be teaching it if I thought it was obvious. The last category is adot. Adot. Okay, and we'll translate that as well. So let's just take a look at how that one appears. It does not appear until, as a named category, until Deuteronomy. But once you see it, you know, oh, yeah, that's right. There is a third category of other things. And I'm going to try to make that case for us. So let's take a look. In Deuteronomy, where did I do? What is this for here? Oh, I see. I see what I did. I see what I did. Okay, I'm going to come back to this. Okay, this is Deuteronomy. This is the Torah that Moses set before the Israelites, or Israel. Moses set before Israel. This is the Torah that Moses set before Israel. These are the Adot, the Chukim, and Mishpatim that Moses addressed to the people of Israel after they had left Egypt. Okay? So there's Deuteronomy at least saying, well, there are 3 categories: Adot, Chukim, and Mishpatim. Okay, we haven't finished it yet, but just to give you a sense of just how big a category this is, that language also appeared. This is a much more famous instance of it. When in time to come your children ask you, oh, this is so weird. This is the part of this verse is missing. Let's go in and take a look here. When in time your children ask you, what mean the decrees, laws, and rules that our God Adonai has enjoined upon you? What are all these things? Now, that's a big question. Whose question is that? That's the question of the Chacham, of the wise child on Passover. Okay? So if you're really wise, and now you all are, you know that there are 3 categories of law. What are the Adot, Chukim, and Mishpatim? What are these 3 categories of law? If you're wise, you're asking. So you can see they're named, and that's part of the Haggadah. So it's like they're like, and you shall say to your children, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Eternal freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand. So we got all of these laws apparently as a response to our newly found freedom. But the only one that is named for us in this week's Parsha is Mishpatim. However, and here is the passage that I wanted to bring your attention to. Okay, it's all Mishpatim. It's just mishpat after case after case. That you saw the ox who gores the cow, and the person who falls in the pit, and the person who you're not allowed to steal their wages, and you're not allowed to steal their bodies, and you're not, like, all the things that you would think of in a legal code. Now, what about Chukim? Do we have to wait till Leviticus to get Chukim? And largely the answer is yes. In other words, it isn't until Leviticus that we start to get laws that are strange in that way, like the Yom Kippur goat sacrifice, where we've entered into a kind of a ritual world of the priests, where laws are not just about running a society, but have some sort of spiritual purpose, and we don't always know what it is. Okay. As it happens, the last law mentioned in Parshat Mishpatim is a chok, is one of the chukim. So this is already a clue. There's just, like, I don't know how many, 50 Mishpatim, one after another of these just ordinances. And then towards the very end, and I'm going to now bring you back up to the, this is Exodus 23, the end of the legal code here. And I just want to give you a sense of, look, we're still talking about Mishpatim. You shall not subvert the mishpat of the needy, keep far from a false charge, do not bring death on those who are innocent, for I will not acquit the wrongdoer, do not take bribes, for bribes blind the clear-sighted, do not, and then as if it's concluding, I really feel like this is another clue here that the Mishpatim are over, because they conclude with a general, and now you shall not oppress the stranger, for you know the feelings of a stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt. Okay. Remember, the first law was you have to let a slave go free. And then the last sort of statement of the Mishpatim are, and you should know what it's like to be oppressed because you were oppressed. It's almost like giving one last justification, underlying value for the Mishpatim. Okay. That, I might have expected that to be the final law given, but that's not the final law given. The final law given, I'm going to scroll down and then come back. Final law given here is way at the end, way at the end, way at the end, way at the end. It's in the middle of a verse. The verse starts, the choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of your God, the eternal. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Lo tavashel gedi b'chalev imo. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Now, that's the beginning of not eating cheeseburgers. It will be mentioned 3 times in the Torah, but it's mentioned here. So it's like, oh, kashrut. It's just the first little sliver. We don't have a full kashrut system, but the first kashrut is being introduced. How great. Now, this is going to be a major Jewish practice. But we know from the Talmud, kashrut is in the category of chukim. So that's interesting. What is it doing here? And what is it doing here? Just a snippet, half a verse at the end of all the laws. So you got like a catalog of 50, I keep saying 50, I don't know how many there are, but I know that the most mitzvot in any Parsha is 74, and it's not this one, so I'm saying 50. 50 mishpatim, and then way at the end, 1 chok. Okay, well, that's interesting. That in itself is structurally interesting. This is mostly the Parsha of Mishpatim, but there's just a little hint to other kinds of laws that will eventually come. But you notice that I scrolled down, right? There was the end of the Mishpatim, and then there's one little, I keep using these Hebrew words, I hope we're all familiar with them now. The end of the just ordinances, and then one little chok, meaning one little decree that seems strange that maybe Satan would make fun of us for. What's taking place in the middle? What's taking place in the middle? Well, these, I want to claim, this category in the middle are the Eidot. The Eidot. Okay? And let's just see what they are, and then we'll wrap up with like an explanation of what is this third category. But let's just like see them so that we can do some thinking on our own. What are Eidot? Oh, and I guess I'll say one other thing before I say that. I could start just, and we should start with, just by defining the word. What is an eidah? It is related to the word for aid, which means witness. So these laws are witnesses. That already is, that's a clue. So the mishpatim are just ordinances. The chukim are decrees. And the eidot are witnesses to something. What are they witness to? So let's take a look. And this is, now, like I said, the Parsha started in chapter 21 and has been going on now for 2.5 chapters with Mishpatim. And then all of a sudden, here, with a sort of what feels like an ending, all of a sudden there's a new category of laws that I don't think that any society would come up with naturally. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield, but in the 7th you shall let it rest and lie fallow. Let the needy among your people eat of it, and what they leave, let the wild beasts eat. You shall do the same with your vineyards and your olive groves. Okay, now here's a big one. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall cease for your labor, in order that your ox and your donkey may rest, and your homeborn slave and the stranger may be refreshed. Be on guard concerning all I've told you. Make no mention of the names of other gods. They shall not be heard on your lips. 3 times a year you shall hold a festival for me. You shall observe the feast of matzah, of unleavened bread, eating unleavened bread for 7 days, as I have commanded you. In the set time, in the month of spring, for in it you went forth from Egypt, and none of you shall appear before me empty-handed. And the feast of the harvest, of the first fruits of your work, of what you sow in the field, and the feast of ingathering. Those are 3 festivals. At the end of the year, when you gather in the results of your work from the field, 3 times a year, all your males shall appeal before their sovereign, the eternal. You shall not offer the blood. All right, I think we'll read to the end. We shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened. The fat of my festal offering shall not be left lying until morning. The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of your God, the eternal. And then we got that little hook at the end. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Very strange organization here. But what I want to claim is that what Parshat Mishpatim has done is given us the Mishpatim. Started with the Mishpatim. That's the main chunk and the main section and the main topic. But there at the very end, almost as if introducing the three categories, it also gives us a chunk of Eidot and one little chok at the end, one little decree at the end. Now, the question is, for our last 5 minutes, what are Eidot? What is that category in the middle of laws that are, I don't think they're laws any society would construct, but they're not meaningless. Like, why are we celebrating Sukkot? We're celebrating Sukkot because we're thanking God for the produce that God has given us, and we have a festival. These are holidays. Why do we keep Shabbat? In memory of God's having created the world, right? Why does the land lie fallow? Because the land belongs to God. Like there are reasons for these things. They're not, the Satan wouldn't come along and say, I don't know what's going on, but it's not justice. So what is this category? And let's see if we can, yeah, we have 4 minutes. We have just enough time for anybody want to try to give some wording, some definition to the category of Eidot, of this middle category. All right, let's take Matt Silverstein.
Jen said it in the comments. These are to create community.
Good.
Yeah, Jen, it's all Jen. I just didn't think she'd get her hand up fast enough. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, great. Okay, that's right. These are Eidot are gathering times, convocations. That's certainly part of it. And yeah, so part of to create community, meaning we all come together on Shabbat. We all come together on the holidays. Shabbat and the holidays is a big part of what Eidot are. Let's take one more thought on what these Eidot are from Noah.
I'd say the festive, ritual, religious observances that we wouldn't think we need to do, but are there to remind us that we're a part of something bigger, the planet, the community, and the whole Jewish world.
Great. That's the other piece of it, is that the key word that Noah said is to remind us. And Eidah is a witness. It's a witness to something. It's there to say, remember, you went free from the land of Egypt. Remember, God created the world. Remember that God owns the land. Remember that God rains down on earth, and that's where your produce comes from. The Eidot are witnesses to something that is true, that is the reason that you are coming together as a community to celebrate that thing, to honor that thing, to give thanks for it. It is, in other words, the laws of the calendar, the laws of the holidays, the laws of the festivals. That category of law is the category known as Eidot. And Jen's exactly right, and Matt is exactly right. Those are the laws that actually bring us together as a community. And Noah's right. Those are the laws that remind us of big, principal, important things that are almost like the things that define us as a people. You know, our belief in God, or our gratitude that we were liberated from Exodus. Basically, in some ways, the religious celebrations of our life, the festival celebration, the calendar. And the calendar is such a major category of Jewish life that actually it turns out Eidot is not a small part of Jewish tradition. Okay, so you have Mishpatim, the legal codes of like the laws the Talmud really, grinds through, and thinking about how do we conduct a civil society, a criminal and civil law. We have the chukim, which are those laws which are just like very strange, but sometimes we just do things for God because God said so. Like we don't eat cheeseburgers. Okay, but God said so. We don't exactly know why. We'll never know exactly why. We can speculate, but we know why we keep Shabbat. We know why we keep Passover. They don't make sense. It's not about, any reasonable person would eat matzah for a week after being liberated from Egypt. No, we know the reasons, but they're not rational. They are communal, emotional, psychological, spiritual, fundamentally religious laws. And in some ways, these are the laws that almost define this legal system in contrast to other legal systems, like the American legal system, where even there you could find parallels. I said the 4th of July is a federal holiday. So there's an example. But in a secular legal system, you less often have a law that mandates the commemoration, the recognition. There are those, you salute a flag or something like that. But that category, that last category, is huge in Jewish law. And Mishpatim, as you can see here, I'm just going to put it on the screen one more time before we close. Mishpatim is really signaling that by giving us tons and tons of Mishpatim. And we could ask the question, why do Mishpatim come first? And that's a good question. as for our further speculation. But then all of a sudden there's a break and we get a few of the Eidot, as if to say, don't think this is all Mishpatim. And then like just one little teaser of a chok, as if to give us all of those three categories that we will eventually have articulated by Moses. And I'll just end by saying, look at the language here. These are the Eidot, Chukim, and Mishpatim that Moses addressed. No, sorry. This is the Torah that Moses set before Israel. Okay, and that was the same language that we started with. These are the Mishpatim that you shall set before them. So there was this moment of Moses presenting all the people with the laws, and we could think, if we just read this week's Parsha, oh, that means the Mishpatim. But it turns out, at least as Moses remembers it, when Moses set the laws, maybe what he did was he gave a bunch of laws, but he didn't just dump them on us as it sometimes feels this week, but he actually started to begin to parse them out into categories. And those categories endured through into Deuteronomy, and they can, I think, be very helpful for helping us think about what are the areas of life that our system of mitzvot is concerned with. Okay, got to run to the airport. If you're in San Francisco tonight, come to my Beit Midrash at Congregation Beth Shalom. Wonderful to see you all. Sorry for the abbreviated class. I will see you all next week. Shabbat Shalom.